Okay, this is the quick review for Algebra 2 and 45, 45, 90 triangles. Really foundational, really important that you know the pattern. So for a 45, 45, 90, you have to think of a right isosceles triangle. Because that's the only way you're going to get these two base angles to be 45 degrees. All right, it's got to be isosceles, right? Remember your geometry. If the base angles are congruent, then the sides opposite them are congruent, and the triangle is an isosceles triangle. All right, so to make the pattern, we can choose any number, but if we make one of the legs 1, this is the easiest way to do the pattern. This other leg therefore has to be 1. And if you use the Pythagorean theorem to find the hypotenuse, you get the square root of 1 squared plus 1 squared, which is the square root of 2. And I've told you guys to put a 1 out in front. It'll help you to see the pattern more clearly. Okay, so with that pattern, now we get a problem like this. And we want to find x. And you say, hey, that's no problem because I already have the hypotenuse as 3/7 times the square root of 2. Therefore, x must be 3/7, right? It has to be the multiplier of the square root of 2. So again, if you look at the example here, pattern, 1 times the square root of 2, 1, 1, right? So just so you understand, in this pattern, if this were a 4, then that would be a 4 and that would be a 4, right? 4 times square root of 2. If this was a 10, then that has to be a 10, and that has to be 10 times the square root of 2. See how that works? If this were a half, then this would have to be a half, and this would have to be the square root of 2 over 2, right? A half times square root of 2. Because you know the pattern, because of similar triangles, the sides are proportional. All right, so 3/7. So what else is a possibility here when you're trying to use the pattern? Well, what if they gave you something like this, the square root of 10 as the hypotenuse? Now, again, I showed you a shortcut in class, but the way you could find n is to make a proportion. And you guys know I always tell you put what you're solving for in the top left. And then I have square root of 10 on the bottom. And then this other side of the proportion is the pattern. So what of the pattern goes where the n goes? A 1. What in the pattern goes where the square root of 10 goes? Square root of 2. All right, and then again, things in the bottom go to the top across the equal sign. So I end up with n equals the square root of 10 over the square root of 2. And if you know what you're doing, that is the square root of 5. You got to simplify it from there. You could either rationalize the denominator or combine them into 1 and reduce the fraction. So n equals the square root of 5. Now also know that with the pattern you can find any of the trig functions. So if they said to you, what is the cosine of 45 degrees? You say fine, that's the adjacent over the hypotenuse. The adjacent is 1. The hypotenuse is square root of 2. Rationalize the denominator and you get the square root of 2 over 2. What if they said something like, what is the, let's not use the secant, let's go cosecant. What is the cosecant of 45? All right, what is the cosecant? It's the hypotenuse over the opposite, so it's going to be square root of 2. And you can do all the trig functions that way as well, right? So the pattern. What does the pattern do? It allows you to do all the trig functions, and it also allows you to find sides of a 45, 45, 90 triangle.